So we're going to finish this today. Let me get you a recap if you haven't been with us on Esther, and correct me if I miss anything. So the whole story starts out with King Ahasuerus, or in the original language, Ahasverosh. So Ahasverosh, he's a king of all of Persia, which extends from Ethiopia all the way to India. Persian Empire, big deal. It was the empire that preceded the Greek Empire with Alexander the Great by about 100 years. So he's there. He's got his wife and Queen Vashti. They have a blowout 6-month party. The 6-month party goes. Then they have a smaller party at the end of that. At the end of that, then King Ahasuerus wants to show off his wife Vashti to the rest of the crowd. He says, honey, come show yourself off. She says, no, I won't do it. So she doesn't do it. Did you like that? That's my no, I won't do it. She says, no, I won't do it. She's actually quite attractive, evidently. And because of that, then all the counselors to Ahasuerus says, look, if she gets away with this, then all of our wives are going to do the same thing with us, all over the entire kingdom. So, you got to put your foot down. So he puts his foot down. And when he puts his foot down, his advisors also say, listen, the best way to do it is to replace Vashti with someone else who will be queen. She loses her queenness because she would not cooperate with you. So Vashti gets put away. You're going to have to replace her. The best way to replace her is you need to do a trophy wife again. Vashti was a trophy wife. You need to find the most beautiful woman in the entire kingdom from Ethiopia to India. You need to find the most beautiful woman, while virgin somewhere in the kingdom. We'll do a gigantic kingdom-wide beauty pageant, basically. So they went up and they rounded up beautiful gals from all over the place, brought them to the capital of Susa, the citadel, brought them to Susa. And in Susa then, they fattened them up for 12 months. That's a bad way to say it. But that's what they did. They basically pampered them for 12 months to get ready for the beauty pageant. And they provided them anything they needed to look their best. And then when that 12-month period was done, then they basically one at a time paraded them to the king and the king's chambers. And at the end of all of that, guess who won the beauty pageant? Our underground, not well-known, under-the-radar Jewish gal, Hadassah. So Hadassah, who has her cousin Guardian, who's with her, they are refugees basically from the land of Israel. And they're there in exile there. And so it turns out that Hadassah wins the prize. She becomes the queen. They change her name from Hadassah, which means myrtle, to Esther, which means star. She's the star of the show. And now she's the queen. And everyone lives happily ever after. Well, no, not quite. Her cousin, Guardian, Mordecai, does one very token nice thing for the king, Ahasuerus. He does a really nice thing, kind of gets in the middle of an assassination attempt. He does that. Everyone forgets about that, and life goes on. But this same guy, Mordecai, who's the uncle, who's the cousin, he also will not pay homage to the bad guy that's in court, who actually ends up being the vice president of the country. And his name is Haman. Okay, Haman ends up becoming vice president of the country, and he hates Mordecai, who is the cousin Guardian of the queen now, but that's kind of a secret. He hates him enough that he decides that instead of killing this Mordecai dude, he's going to kill the entire race that Mordecai... That was very weak, Joyce. Was that? Oh, really? Okay. Can't let your cell phone make noise. It's not loud enough. Okay, so it turns out that Mordecai's people are going to be taken out by the bad guy. And so this plot transpires. Eventually it becomes known. Mordecai goes to his cousin Guardianess. What's a guardian's person is? I don't know what that's called. Anyway, his ward, thank you. So he appeals to her and says, look, maybe God put you in this place as queen for this very moment. This is the very purpose. You need to barge in on one of the king's sessions, which is punishable by death if he doesn't like you interrupting. You need to barge into one of the king's sessions, and you need to make an appeal for the Jews, or else we're all going to die. And by the way, if you think being queen is going to save you from that fate, you're wrong. You're going to go down too. However, if you decide not to risk your neck and go in and barge into the king, God's going to get the people, the Jews, out anyway. It's a brief little moment of faith in terms of what God has promised to the Jews. But still, go in and do that. So what does she do? She gathers up her courage. She goes into the king. And the king doesn't have her killed. He raises the golden scepter to her, which is like, the stay of execution. She makes her appeal. And then the king says, what is it you want? And she stammers, lunch. Can you come to lunch? So she invites him to lunch, and she asks that the king as well as the vice president, bad guy, come to her house for lunch. So they come to lunch. They're having lunch. They have some wine after lunch. And then after everything's done, then Ahasuerus says, okay, honey, what's the deal? What are we here for? And she stammers again, come back to lunch tomorrow. And that's where we left the story last week. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Second time's a charm. So the king and Haman went in to feast with Queen Esther. And on the second day, as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king again said to Esther, okay, what's your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Let's do this thing. Well, he didn't say that. Then Queen Esther answered, if I found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, this is a nice soft approach, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. She's let it out. Someone's going to die. Will you grant my people their life? For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. I like those three together. Destroyed, oh, more than destroyed. Killed, oh, more than destroyed and killed. Annihilated. Okay, so we know where she's going with that. They've been sold, and literally they have been sold. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men or women, I would have been silent. For our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king. So she says, if someone just sold us out as slaves to another country and took us away from serving you, O king, in your kingdom, that'd be one thing. But it's worse than that. It's worse. Killed, destroyed, annihilated. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, who is he and where is he who has dared to do this? Okay, in your mind's eye, you see the lunch? There's three people at lunch here. Ahasuerus, Esther, and Haman. Okay? They're at lunch. So the king looks at her and says, who has done this? And Haman's trying not to make eye contact. Oh, good for you. Okay, try not to make eye contact. Shh. So Esther says, a foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman. Oh, that's nice. Okay. So who is it? It's Haman. And I have to always imagine, I always imagine this as a stage play in my mind. I see Haman go, play dumb. That worked for me as growing up as a kid when I did something wrong. So, playing dumb. And then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. Okay? So King Ahasuerus says, give me a second here. So the king arose in his wrath from the wine drinking. Wow. This isn't Balaam. This is, okay. The king arose from his wrath from the wine drinking and went into the palace garden. He's taken a minute. He's got to get his head straight from all this kind of stuff. And Haman, he stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that harm was determined against him by the king. So the king leaves the room, and in this very awkward moment on the stage play, he and Esther are staring across the table from each other, while the king's out getting a smoke, trying to figure out what to do about all this kind of stuff, okay? Well, maybe not getting a smoke, but okay, I added that part. Okay, so awkward moment. And the king returned from the palace garden to the place where they were drinking wine as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. So you see, there's the couch. Thank you. Okay, you're on top of things this morning. It's even the same color. Okay. So she's, when they eat, you don't sit up at upright chairs. You actually recline slightly. That's the couch. So she's reclined still around the table where they've been eating. And he tries to make his appeal. He gets off of his couch and he goes over to her and tries to get in her face. And it looks pretty bad. Okay, yeah. Just think of the body language for a second here. So, of course, that's exactly the moment when the king comes back in and sees this going on. And the king says, will he even assault the queen in my presence, in my house? It just looks really bad. So, yeah. So as the word left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. I should have put a microphone out here so we can capture this for eternity here. Okay, so they covered his face. You know why they covered his face? That's what you did for when you sentenced a dead man to die. Yeah. You know, if someone knocks at your door and puts a black bag over your head, something bad is going to happen after that. So that's kind of what's going on here. Okay, then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, well, moreover, the gallows that Haman, the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai, remember he was going to kill Mordecai, whose word saved the king. Mordecai, that's the nice thing he did at the very beginning of the story. Those gallows are standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high. Okay? So this guy says, look, if you want to do away with this guy, what a wonderful convenience we have here. It turns out that he actually built a gallows to kill Mordecai at his house. How convenient is that? There's something ready to go. It's not even shovel ready, it's shovel done. Okay? So he points this out, and of course, the king, a little light bulb goes off in his head, and he says, hang him on that. Dum dum. Hey, we can do mood music too. Yeah, hang him on that. Just hang him on that. How convenient. And it was built to kill Mordecai, his enemy. And guess who's being killed instead? Haman! Okay, so they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Yeah. Then the wrath of the king abated. So this really made the king mad, this entire thing. He'd put this guy in his second in command. And now he understands that the second in command had actually put together a plan to kill all of Esther's people and probably even Esther herself. And clearly Mordecai, her cousin. I mean, that just really angered the king. But you know what? I don't have too much sympathy for the king because it's partially his fault. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. He's the one who basically said to the second command guy, he said, look, here's my seal. Do whatever you want to do. And, make some proclamations. And whatever you say, put this stamp on it, and they'll do it. And use my name. Everything's just fine. And with that in place, he went ahead and put together this genocide order. So the king has had his hands off of this throughout the entire thing. So look, Mr. King, you're partially responsible for this problem where we're at right here. But the wrath of the king abated. Okay. Well, the tables are turned. Something interesting happens. We start in chapter 8. On that day, King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, the house of Haman. The house of Haman. Okay, boy, we're losing it already. Okay, on that day, he said, the house of Haman, the enemy of Jews, he gave it to Esther. So, if you're second in command, actually, you have a pretty nice dwelling, evidently. It looks just like this. This is the picture in my Bible, not. So, but it is something really nice. Probably right on the Tigris Euphrates River. I don't know, but it's probably pretty nice. And in fact, when it says house, it means more than just the physical house. It means the whole household of. It means all the servants. I mean, it's the entire way to live as well as all the people who serve you to do that. So the king gives this to Esther. Says, look, this guy's dead. He's on a pole. He's 75 feet in the air in his backyard. Just seems so fitting. It's just so fitting. By the way, we pointed out last week, this probably isn't a hanging. It's probably it's an impaling is what it is. He's on a stick 75 feet in the air. So it gives the entire estate and everything that he owns to Esther. And Mordecai came in before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. So evidently the king never knew that Mordecai, the guy who hung out in the front gates, was actually related to Esther. How about that? So she explains who he is to her. They're cousins, and because her uncle is the father of Mordecai. Okay, so they're cousins. That's what that means. And he's also a guardian in that sense. So the king took off his signet ring. Oh man, don't do this again. Which he had taken from Haman, and he gave it instead to Mordecai. So he gave all of the ability to make decisions in the kingdom to Mordecai, the guy who should be on the stake in the backyard of Haman, but instead Haman is on the stake in the backyard. Okay? So, and Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. So you catch this. So the king gives the entire state to Esther, and then Esther gives the entire state to Mordecai to run and take care of and do all that kind of stuff. So, leaving it in the family that way. It's a great deal. And they all lived happily ever after. And what? See, you never trust me when I do that, do you? But, yes, Steve's counting chapters. Well, we got 2 chapters to do. We got it. Well, okay, so they could live happily ever after right here because, everything's cool for Esther, everything's cool for Mordecai, and everything's cool with King Ahasuerus. So everything's cool, right? What's not cool? The Jews are still scheduled to die in about 8 months from now. So we're going to have to deal with that, is what's going on. So let's find out what happens. So anyway, unfinished business. And that's the unfinished business that comes up. So verse 3, so Esther spoke again to the king. And this is one of those bust into the presence of the king events too. This again could get her killed. This happens again. You see that's exactly the case when you read here. She fell at his feet and wept and pleaded with him to avert the evil plan of Haman, the Agagite, and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. Now, this is kind of a funny thing. You would think that when all this came to be and the bad guy was put on the stake, you would think that the king would say, we need to follow through and put out the dictate that kind of saves everyone's lives. Yeah, he doesn't seem like the brightest guy. And it seems like both Mordecai and Esther should have said something, but maybe they didn't want to intrude right there. But somehow it just never occurred to the king that we need to reverse this dictate. So Esther has to risk her life again by going in and intruding in the king's business and coming and saying, we forgot something. Wow. Which is why my respect for Ahasuerus is not so great, because he should have followed through with this. So she comes and she pleads for the Jews. And when the king held out the golden scepter, see, that's the sign she's not going to get killed for interrupting, held out the golden scepter to Esther. Esther rose and stood before the king. And she said, okay, if it please the king, and I have found favor in his sight, this is the humble way to start, and if this thing seems right before the king, so okay, I'm not forcing this on you, if you think this is a good idea, what do you say? And I'm pleasing in his eyes, which of course she was. There's a fetching picture of her. Let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, Hammedatha, that's bad too, yeah. Okay. Which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the provinces of the king. And right at that point, the king goes, oh yeah. Okay. So they bring it up. And she said, for how can I bear to see the calamity that's coming to my people? Or how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred? Of course, the answer is you can't. So then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I've given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he intended to lay hands on the Jews. He goes on, but you may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king and seal it with the king's ring. For an edict written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked. So he's got full authorization. He can do just like the bad guy did before. So the king's scribes were summoned at that time. And in the 3rd month, which is the 7th month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and an edict was written according to all that Mordecai commanded concerning the Jews, to the satraps and the governors and the officials of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to each province in its own script and to each people in its own language, and curiously also to the Jews in their script and their language. So they put out this multi-kingdom dictate that's in the local language of all the places it's going. Okay, it's in Hindi and over in India, and it's in Ethiopia. It's in Ethiopian. I don't know. And it's in those local languages, and it's also in the local written languages, okay? And it also goes out to the Jews, because the message isn't just to tell everyone else, don't kill the Jews. the message is also, the Jews, you can defend yourselves, which they couldn't before. And you'll see he does it right here. He wrote in the name of the king Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring. Then he sent the letters by mounted couriers riding on swift horses that were used in the king's service, bred from the royal stud. So these are the fast horses. These are the good ones, okay? So they go out as fast as possible that way, saying that the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather and to defend themselves. So it's primarily a message to the Jews. You can gather, you can defend yourselves. The gather part's actually pretty interesting. It basically is if you're in a village in one of these places, gather all the Jews together. It's like circling the wagons in a sense, and get all together and stand back to back, and you can defend yourselves. You don't have to be picked off one at a time in your houses. So it's really tactically do whatever it takes to defend yourself, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them. Children and women included, and to plunder their goods. So it looks pretty brutal, but what he's saying is if someone comes after you to kill you, including your children and your women, you can do back to them exactly what they're planning to do to you. But only if they're planning to kill you, only if they're your enemies, only if they're aggressors in the particular case. This is not licensed to the Jews to go killing all the people they live in the midst of. This is just licensed to brutally defend themselves in the same fashion that they're being attacked. You may attack them in response. Saying that the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather, defend their lives on one day. So they're only allowed to do this on one day. That was the day of the killing that was originally put together. On one day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. I love saying his name. On the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So that's in the 12th month. And you remember at the beginning of this chapter, it said we're currently in the 3rd month. So it's about 8 or 9 months away. So we have 8 or 9 months for the riders who are on the horses that are bred from the royal stud. I love that too. Okay, they get to go through the entire kingdom and to send this message out in order to save all these lives. So a copy of what was written was to be issued as a decree in every province, being publicly displayed. They'll tack it up on the outside of houses to all peoples, and the Jews were to be ready on that day to take vengeance on their enemies. Now, I'll stop right there because how do they know who their enemies are? Well, this is a mixed group of people that are in the kingdom of Persia right now. So, in the centralist part of the kingdom are they all Persians. Everywhere else, they're kind of mixed everythings. So, who are the enemies? Well, this is a little speculation, but I think from the day that the dictate went out to kill the Jews in the 12th month, that went out to the different localities in the 127 provinces, and people in those provinces heard that and said, you mean we get to kill my Jewish neighbor 12 months from now? This is going to be great. I hate those people. And they probably taunted their Jewish neighbors. You know what the paper says in town? Did you see it? It's on the side of Fred's house. Did you see what it says? It says, in the 12th month, on that particular day, we're going to come for you and your wife and your children. We're going to kill you all. And the king wants us to do it. Good luck for the next 12 months. So I think pretty sure the enemies of the Jews made very aware to the Jews who were going to kill them. They were just eating this up and tormenting them. So in fact, by the time you get to this, where the retribution time is, they know who's out to get them. I'm pretty sure they know who's out to get them. So the couriers, mounted on their swift horses that were used in the king's service, rode out hurriedly, urged by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. So there's the kingdom in pink right there. There's Susa right at the top of the Persian Gulf today. Its ruins are still there today. You can actually go to a site where they're digging it out. And they sent riders through the entire reaches of the place. So they sent them out, fast horses. Word got out relatively quickly on these fast horses, and then they had, 7, 8, 9 months to have this sink in and to say, look, on that one day, remember that day that it said you could kill the Jews? You can't kill the Jews. In fact, the king is saying that Jews can kill you. So on your toes. Another turn of the tables. It's really fascinating. Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white with a great golden crown and a robe of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. Fascinating. So again, incredible turn of tables. It turned out that Mordecai replaced Haman Okay, he replaced him, and so it turns out that he's actually in the same stead that his predecessor was, and he's wearing robes that looks like he's the king's right hand man. Oh, he looks like the king. Now, why would he strolling out into the city of Susa, which is that's native Persians right there? Why would a Jew strolling out in the king's studs make everybody happy in Susa? Well, you can speculate on this as well, but it's probably because his predecessor named Haman was probably a jerk and probably caused a lot of problems in the area. So as soon as Mordecai comes out having taken his place, people are saying, psh, that Mordecai, he's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. The king's kind of clueless, forgets to even reverse his decree, but Mordecai, nice guy. So that's what we get at right here. They rejoiced at seeing him. Not only that, the Jews, oh yeah, sure, the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. Oh, yes. So light instead of the weight of their death sentence. It's like having a death sentence for the next several months. Light instead of the weight of that. Gladness, which is more of a word that has to do with joy in the presence. I mean, hope in the presence. Joy, of course, which is joy. And honor, which means they're respected once again. They're not second-class citizens to be killed. So the Jews, I mean, everything changed for the Jews at that point. And in every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict reached, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And later on in the book, it's explained that because of this feast and this holiday, the Jews to this very day should celebrate this event. And that dictate was put out 4 centuries before Jesus. And this very week, they'll celebrate it again. And it looks just like that picture on the bottom. I've said it's sort of, if I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, so it's pretty familiar with me, but it's like a Jewish Mardi Gras. It's the best thing I can think of. You put on costumes that are very garish. You're very loud. You drink an awful lot. An awful lot. It's usually Mogen David wine. And me and my friends tried to drink a lot of Mogen David wine once when we were underage. I have to confess. I can still remember throwing up on that. But it's really, it's very sweet. So anyway, that's what goes on in Jewish communities. There's even some Talmudic writings, which is the rabbis, they've come back and they said, you need to feast like it's no tomorrow. You need to really get drunk. I mean, you really need to just get wasted. It's very much a part of the Jewish culture today. It's a crazy thing. So you party hardy is what they're saying when you come to Purim. And remember, Purim is the holiday. Pur is the Persian word for lots. Remember, they threw lots to figure out what day to kill all the Jews. And im is the plural ending on it, so it's a lot. Lots, it's Purim, and it looks kind of like this. You have Hamantash and cookies down there, which are either translated Haman's hat or Haman's ears, or it has lots of different uses. But it's only made during this time of year. We used to go to delicatessens in this part of March every year, and you could get Hamantashins, and it's kind of cool. So anyway, that's what's going on. And there's one of the noisemakers right there, one of those ratchet noisemakers. Those are a big deal. I mean, big deals. Some of my friends, I'd go into their bedrooms, and I'd say, hey, what's that? They go, it's a noisemaker. Watch this. And I said, what do you have that for? Well, we do this thing in March. And then they explain it to me. So anyway, so that feasting goes on to this very day, and the celebration as well. And many from the peoples of the country declared themselves Jews, for fear of the Jews had fallen on them. Turning the tables, the biggest way you can possibly think of. I mean, well, yeah, I'm a Jew too, so I get to kill you if you're my enemy on that day. Well, watch out. It's just, it's just, it makes a ton of sense. Because you really couldn't tell who was who based on clothing. They're all refugees, basically, from other places. What's that? They wanted to go to the party. They wanted to go to the party. Yeah, it's party time. Now they all lived happily ever after.
Not yet. Still 2 more chapters.
Well, in this context, they sort of did. And yeah, most of the thread's gone, so I fooled you. They did live happily ever after at this point. Yes, okay, so there you go. Goodbye, Esther. Okay, so now, as you know, when we do narratives, we have to come back at the end and we have to draw some morals of the story, which is what you do. Again, this is a fascinating way when you talk about Bible interpretation. For instance, when you read Paul's letters, they're very what we call didactic. They're teaching-oriented. And some of the concepts are deep enough that you explain them and explain them and say, that's not quite. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an illustration. It's like... So you have to add a real-world illustration to just illuminate the concept. It's the opposite around in narratives. You get the illustration first, the life of Esther, Mordecai, and Haman, and then you need to draw some conclusions after that. So that's why narratives are really fun this way. So this is where we kick back, stroke our chin, take a look. And the one question I'll ask you is, since you know most of the story, you haven't done the last 2 chapters, so who's in control of the story's outcome? God is. Of course he is. But when you go through the characters one at a time, you realize nobody in the character list is, which is really interesting because when you write a novel or a piece of fiction, usually there's dominant characters who are in control of the outcome. Whether it's superheroes or whether it's super bad guys. I mean, someone has an overriding power. And that's what makes the drama on a piece of fiction really nice because someone's in control and then somehow that gets turned upside down. But in this particular case, no one's really in control. I mean, think about this. About Ahasuerus. Was he in control all the way through? No, I think he's the least guy in control. And he's the king of Persia. I mean, he should be the one who makes things happen. He should put his foot down and either allow or disallow. But even the bad things that happened under his nose, and he didn't like it after the end. I mean, the guy was sort of clueless, out of control, and mostly interested in making sure he's got a trophy wife. And that's it. I mean, Ahasuerus he's clearly not in control. In fact, he is the most controlled person in the story. If you think about it. It's fascinating. He's got all the power and so he doesn't control the outcome. How about Hadassah, her Jewish name? Was she in control?
Sometimes.
She influenced. Yeah, she had a role to play, but very easily, what if she had shown up in front of the king's chambers, uninvited, and he decided he was just having a bad day, had a bad pizza the night before, he had a tummy ache, and she shows up, and he gets ticked at her, and he says, there's plenty more where she came from, and there's a lot of women that came through for the beauty pageant. So, but no, it turns out coincidentally, she comes in and she's not killed for that impertinence. The whole story would have changed if he had not done that. Aren't we lucky that he didn't have her killed for the impertinence? Because that really is a grotesque impertinence to kind of come in like that. No, she had a lot of influence, and there's no doubt about that. And in fact, her cousin Mordecai was saying to her, maybe you've been placed in this time and place for this very purpose, which is to save your people by going to the king's presence. So, I mean, there's an influence there. But it's, even she says, there's no certainty here. I can go into the king, and he can very easily not raise the golden scepter to me. And hey, if I perish, I perish. Remember her saying that? So she's ready to buy the big one for this entire. So no, she's really not in control, but she does have a role to play. So you got to do that. Her name is changed to Esther after she becomes queen. So her influence before becoming queen and after becoming queen. After becoming queen, she has more audience, I guess. Yeah, but she's still, whether she's the Myrtle Hadassah or she's the Star Esther, you would think being queen that she could put the thumb on Ahasuerus and she could have her way and she could control him. That's often what happens in places like this where you have women in high power. They know how to control the guys. No, they usually don't get to be in those positions unless they do, and they wield that. And a lot of novel fiction has that as the story point. But she's just clearly not doing that at all. She's not doing it. Part of it might be an age difference as well, because Ahasuerus is probably a generation older than her. And remember, she was brought in for the beauty pageant. These were all young virgins. So we're talking 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old girls. So, that could be part. So no, she's not in charge either. How about her cousin guardian, Mordecai? Was he in charge? Could he control the outcome? He's influential, yes, but he's largely hanging out at the gates to the palace. That is not a man that's in control. And he uses that position to do a great kindness to the king, and he stops an assassination attempt. Okay, that's good. Any decent person would do that. But still, a control position and controlling the outcome. He's the one that suggested to Hadassah that she go into the king. And he made some good logical points to her that if she doesn't do it, it's not going to save her own life, you know. And that God will still save the Jews anyway. But come on, maybe God put you here. So he has influence. There's no doubt about that. And he's using what he knows about God's promises to the promised people of the Jews to a certain. So yeah, but in control? No. But he's a piece of the picture, I suppose. How about this guy? Haman! Woo! Well, that's the last chance you'll get, so I'll do it one more time. Haman! Okay, enough of that. Okay, so was he in control? Well, he's the one that probably exercised the most power in the story. I mean, he was made the right-hand man of the king. He was given the king's signet ring. I mean, he does all this kind of stuff. He is clearly a man with power and clearly a man with the highest influence, clearly the man who knows how to get things done. He would be my candidate for the guy who can control the end. But what happens in the end to him? He's stuck on his own pike in his backyard, and his entire estate is given to Esther, and Esther gives it to Mordecai, and they all lived happily ever after. And as a result of all that stuff, the Jews that he wanted to take down across the entire kingdom are protected, and they're allowed to defend themselves. And even the non-Jews throughout the entire kingdom want to be Jews because of the, his ability to control his outcome was horrible. I mean, it was all turned upside down. But the reason that his plans were turned upside down had nothing to do with Ahasuerus, had very little to do with Hadassah. Esther had very little to do with Mordecai, but it had everything to do with God. See, that's the issue. And that's really the gigantic carryaway in Esther, is that God is the one who controls the outcome, even though these people play a role in the story. God is the one who does the outcome. And that really is the gigantic carryaway. This idea of providence, when we talk about providence isn't just a generally nice word for goodness. Oh, providential. Providence from a biblical perspective is the fact that God is in control in invisible ways in the affairs of man. And it doesn't mean God's not there because you can't see him, but God gets his way regardless. This is providence. And it shows up in many themes, especially in the Old Testament stories, where God gets his way. But isn't it lucky that so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did this? Isn't it lucky that all these things in a chain happen? Isn't it lucky that it turns out that Mordecai happened to do this random kindness for the king? Isn't it lucky he decided to do that? He didn't have to get involved in that. That ended up saving their lives in the end. Isn't it lucky that the king forgot about the kindness that Mordecai did, so that it wasn't until he was sleepless in Susa and was reading these boring annals about what he'd accomplished in his life, and he reads Mordecai's name in there, sometime after, and he reads more, and he asks this guy, hey, did we ever do anything nice for this guy? Because it's not written down right here. Well, no, we haven't done anything nice for this guy. Well, we should do something nice for this guy. Hey, who's out in the chamber right now? Well, that Haman guy? See, I turned it off. The Haman guy, he's out there in the outside challenge. Bring him in. Let's ask him what we should do to honor Mordecai. And then all that happened. Remember that? Isn't it lucky that the king didn't recognize Mordecai when he happened, but it did it later instead at just the right time? And you can go down the list of luckies. There are no luckies in this. But all these things had to happen for the outcome to turn out the way it did. So how is it, and this is the fundamental question that you or I will never be able to answer, how is it that you have rational human beings making independent decisions that God still gets his way in the end? Because God did make a promise to the Jews to preserve them and not to destroy them. God did allow them to be taken captive into Babylon when Nebuchadnezzar came in. And Mordecai and Esther are both third generations after that had happened. But God had promised that he was going to bring them back in the land, and God promised that his people wouldn't go away. But if it was up to the bad guy, they would be all gone. It would be genocide that would be unprecedented. So God has to intervene. How does God intervene through the independent agency of all these people making their decisions, including the stupidity of Ahasuerus and including the wrath of Haman? How is that possible? And that's why you won't be able to answer that, and I won't either. But we're given multiple occasions throughout the Old Testament, and I could give you a dozen of them where this is clearly the case, is that God still gets what he wants. When God made a promise to the Jews, he was not going to let Ahasuerus, and he wasn't going to let Haman or anyone else get in his way. He was going to make his promise to the Jews. So that's what he does. This is where the thinking through this will kind of hurt your brain. I won't look at that. This over here on the right, Francis Schaeffer, a pretty famous theologian of the 20th century, wrote 3 books in a trilogy, and the title of the last one came to my mind. I was thinking about this. He is there and he's not silent. So throughout the entire story of Esther, he's there and he's not silent, but he's kind of invisible. And I mentioned this once before, that there's some controversy about even including Esther as a book in the Bible because God's not mentioned. How can you include a book in the Bible when God's not mentioned? Come on now, that's crazy. And by the way, a little bit of trivia, Dead Sea Scrolls have pieces of all the Old Testament books except for Esther. So that it's kind of controversial. A little piece of trivia, God's name is actually in Esther. It's there's an acrostic of the Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God, YHWH, Yahweh. Those 4 letters show up in 4 places in 4 consecutive words. As the first letter of 4 words, twice. As the last letter of 4 words, twice. It's pretty interesting. It's a piece of trivia. Why? Someone deliberately did this. It's not an accident. It turns out that when I was working for HP and we were doing like patent work and stuff like that, when we would document some of our designs, so we'd have prior art dates and stuff like that on the work that you had done, they actually counseled us to embed your last name somewhere in the document by making it so that the first letter of the subsequent paragraphs spell your name. Or a bunch of words in a line, spell your name. So that if it ever goes into court and you have to prove, did you really write this? Did this really come from you? You can say, look at the first word of these paragraphs. My name. Oh, so it's like a signature. Well, you find this 4 times in Esther. You find a 4-word acrostic where one letter at the beginning of the words or 1 letter. So God's name there. Why was it hidden like that? Well, there's a lot of speculation about that. And the speculation is that this document actually circulated amongst the Jews in exile. And so you couldn't be that overt about being a Jew. You couldn't be that overt about praising the God of Israel. But you can still include them in that way. Was it caught by people? More than likely. Because the Jews, in part of their transmission process of transmitting their written pieces, they had guys who did error checking. If you were with us and we talked about how we got the Bible, they would do error checking. And part of that error checking was counting letters in the text. And one of the things they would do when they count the letters, they would check to make sure that the copy had the same amount of letters in the text. They'd also check to see that the middle letter, numerically, is the same letter. They had a whole bunch of numeric checks. So they were also into checking the first and last letters of character. So they did this a lot. So they knew that if you came from a Jewish background, you knew about the whole Jewish tradition about passing on scriptures. Someone is counting letters and looking at letters. Someone's going to notice, look, there's Yahweh. By the way, Yahweh is the Hebrew word from which we have the clumsy translation Jehovah comes from. There's Yahweh. So Yahweh is in the story, overtly in the story, but hidden to pagan eyes. And that clearly is the case too when we look at this story. He's there and he's not silent. You can see God orchestrating the events to protect his people, to follow through with his promise to protect his people, and they wouldn't be eradicated. God's hand is clearly there, and he's not silent, but somehow he does it through the independent decisions of the people there. How does that happen? I don't know, but he does. If you want to follow up on one of the best examples in the Old Testament besides Esther, and Esther, this is one that rabbis will point to. If you want to talk about the providence of God, they'll point to Esther. Another one they'll point to is in the end of Genesis when you talk about the life of Joseph, one of the sons of Jacob, who gets thrown into prison after his brothers sell him into slavery. You remember that story? Sell him into slavery because they're jealous of him because he's got a coat of many colors and we hate this guy. And they sell him into slavery. He goes down to Egypt. He goes into prison. Boom, 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 boom. And suddenly he's the second in charge of Egypt. And he saves the world from starvation as well as Jews. Now, isn't that a lucky set of circumstances? Again, it's like, how does that happen? God even uses the ill will of his own brothers to accomplish what God is going to guarantee happens. This is called providence. Okay, the two big providence verses in the New Testament, Ephesians 1:11, in him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. Who's in control of that outcome? God is, not me. And Paul starts out this great teaching letter to the church in Ephesus by reminding them, look, God's in charge. God's the one that called you into what you're into. You think you chose him. He chose you. Ha, ha, ha. Well, I think I did choose him. Well, he really chose you. Well, how's that possible? Providence of God. I don't know. We can argue about that all day. So that one's, that's what he does. Works all things according. And of course, that probably rings another verse in your mind as you read that, Romans 8:28. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. It doesn't say God makes good happen to everybody. Okay? So you got to make sure you qualify that. But for those that he loves and are called according to his purpose, he does make that happen. Now that automatic raises in our mind, if you're thinking like I am right now about this providence idea, then how do I explain when bad things happen to me? How do I explain when bad things happen to me?
He knows the answer.
He does know the answer. And you have to, at the beginning of that pondering in your head, now this could be a sudden health problem. It can be a death in the family, it can be a loss of a job. I mean, it can be so many things that you and I both would agree bad. That's a bad thing. I don't want that to happen. So the question is how do you deal with that in your mind when that comes around? Yeah, Doug. All things work together. So are you willing to actually embrace that? See, that's the challenge at the point when a bad thing happens. Maybe I've wrongly defined it. He wants us to fall back on him. And if you remember the promise in the Old and the New Testament is that, in fact, it says it explicitly in the New Testament. What's eternal life? It's knowing the Father. It's relationship. What's the most important commandment? To love the Lord your God. So the issue is that circumstances can come and go. Health can come and go. Deaths in the family can come and go. But does that threaten the blessing of relationship with God? Not at all. And in fact, at the end of life, you say, well, okay, at the end of life, we think more clearly about things than we normally do in the middle of life. At the end of life, we look back and we say, the most valuable things that I've received throughout my entire life seem to be connected with relationships, not with the new car we had in 1972, right? It has to do with relationships. And that's God trying to get our attention to the best that's good for you is relationship with me. Everything else is a mere kind of gift token of that, but it's relationship with God. And that's what it is. When am I most drawn deepest into my relationship with God? When am I most deeply called in my relationship with God? Is it good times or bad times? Bad times. But who would wish on us bad times in order to deepen our relationship with God? Well, if our relationship with God is the good, maybe that's it. You see? So we often wrongly define good and bad. I'm not going to say to you that health problems and deaths are good. But what I am trying to say to you when I see in those situations is there's a greater good engaged here than just that. And that's troubling and that's grievous, and I agree with you on the loss. I mean, that's real. But let's not leave God out of this picture. He has chosen to call you his children, and you are. And you can't mess with that. So that's the backbone of what comes back all over. You look at the nation of Israel and all the history that they go through. Man, it's great, it's bad. It's great, it's bad. You look at our lives. It's great, it's bad. But all through, what can separate us from the love of God? Nothing. So you're back to relationship again. So and now, I can say that right now. And you could go home today and something horrible might happen. And you could say to yourself, well, I don't know how this fits in. But that's honest. We don't know how it fits in. But somehow in God's economy, in terms of deepening the best and only good we have in relationship with him, seems to come from this and not from this. In fact, the psalmist often writes, he says, don't give me so much, God, that I forget to need you. And don't give me so little that I'm out trying to steal bread all the time. Just meet my needs. Okay, so this is the providence of God. Okay, we're going to wrap up on this right here. So if you go to a celebration, go to Joyce's house? Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah. If you do, I mean, they're really fun. They're very public events. They're crazy. There's songs that they sing. One of them stuck in my ear as I was growing up because I love the title of it. Utsuetsa. 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 It's the first two words of this song in Hebrew. Utsuetsa v'safar dabru davar v'alo yakom ka ki Emmanuel. If that last thing looks like Emmanuel, it actually is. They throw the K in some dictions of this. Ki Emmanuel is what it is. And you know what Emmanuel means, right? God with us. So what does the rest of this song say that they sing at Purim? I thought I'd let you hear it. You want to hear the song? Here we go. Here's where it gets crazy. Get ready. This is Purim. This is pure Purim stuff here. It's party time. One more time. This is stuck in my head. So what do the rest of the words mean? And this is what's telling about this. And why does it apply to Esther? And is it from Esther? It's not from Esther. It's not from Esther. It's from Isaiah. And this is it. This is spoken to the enemies of Israel. Take counsel together, but it won't come to anything. It won't come to nothing. Speak a word, but it will not stand. For God is with us. You see, that is the perfect application for Esther. It's the perfect application. You can even have people getting together, counseling together for our destruction, but it will come to nothing. In fact, those phrases match. Take counsel together, that's the utsuetza. That's the take counsel together. But it will come to nothing, that's the vasufar. Speak a word, dabu davar. Speak a word, but it won't stand, ve'oloyakum. For Emmanuel, God is with us. So even though you can't see him, even though he's not on the ink of the page in Esther, even though you don't see him in the midst of where you are, he is there. He is there. And his will is being done in your life for good. And that's the overriding message of Esther. It's a great story. It's a true story. And there's so many turnings of the table. And I mean, it's just a great story. But what you see is the invisible God having his way with man. He's there. And so Jews will dance around drunken and sing this song. Basically, yeah, get yourself together, make plans against me. It won't come to any fruition. You can talk amongst yourselves about how you're going to get us, but you know what? God's with us. He's with us. That's Purim. That's Purim. Now, there is an epilogue because we didn't read the last two chapters. Oh, look, we don't have time to read the two chapters. So, 8 months later, the stuff transpires, and I'm going to let you read that. As we said in school, this is an exercise for the student. So, read chapters 9 and 10 to see how the story transpires out, and we're not going to do it here this morning. It happens pretty much like you think it would, except for one thing you probably didn't predict, and that's that Haman, I see I spooked you, who's already dead, does have 10 sons. They all hang. Yeah, it's great. But there's more that goes on. So check how it transpires in chapter. That's most of chapter 9. And then chapter 10 is just a very short kind of follow-up thing. But you'll see how it all transpires. It happens just like you think it would, so we don't have time to read it this morning. But remember, when you talk about Esther, you're thinking about the fact that regardless of people actually even plotting against you to bring you evil, and by the way, we don't fight against flesh and blood, But Satan himself is doing this. Even despite all of that, God is with us. And all things work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. We may never make sense of the bad things this side of eternity. But on the other side of eternity, I guarantee you, none of that will be wasted on your relationship with God. None of it will be wasted. Even the bad stuff. So it seemed fitting for us to go off singing this song. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. No. No. This is it right here. I'll not be shaken. And when things bad happen, remember Esther, remember Joseph, remember so many stories like that. Was God outstripped by the plans of bad people and by the coming of bad stories? Did that surprise God? Did that overpower God? Can anything separate you from yourself? No. So that's what Psalm 62 is all about. It's exactly the same thing. What we do is I won't be shaken. And look at the first words. I love this. For God alone I wait in silence. My soul is still before the Lord. He's my rock and my salvation, my fortress strong. I trust in him. And in fact, in the Old Testament, the picture for the strength of God is always the word for arm. Guns. It's always arm. And in the same language, when you talk about him being a rock, he says that we're in his arms. It actually means we're inside his strength. That's what it means. And then when things go bad, just as an aside, when things go bad, Isaiah writes and he says, is it that the arm of the Lord is too short that he cannot save? Is that what happened? He's trying to get to you and he can't get there? Is his arm insufficient to bring you? And in the next breath, Isaiah says, no. It's your iniquities that have separated you from him. So who went away? Did God go away or did you go away? We went away. Amen. God's so good to us. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we do indeed thank you for your faithfulness to us, your devoted love to us, which still amazes us. And Lord, we come to understand that if there's any love that we have for you, it's only because you first loved us. You're drawing us into yourself. You're delighting us with yourself. And we really don't deserve it. But through the blood of Christ, the problems that we've had because of our independence and our rebellious and our sin have been cleared because of the blood of Christ. And now when you look at us, you see the righteousness of Christ. And that still just blows our minds. We don't deserve that. And that your love is realized in our lives because of what Christ has done for us. So, Father, I pray in a very practical way that as we move forward in our lives and we receive bad news and circumstances turn upside down and the unthinkable happens in our lives, and Lord, we suddenly are face to face with the loss of things about which we are out of control. I pray that you'd remind our hearts through your Holy Spirit that's in us, that you remind our hearts that there is one who is not out of control, and that's you. That's you. And so as our hearts and our minds scream, I'm out of control, I can't protect myself, I can't stop this bad thing from happening, yet, Lord, we place ourselves in your capable arms, the strength of your capable arms, and we understand that your promise to us that you'll never leave us or forsake us is real, and that nothing has surprised you, and nothing has overpowered you, and nothing has separated us from your love. And Lord, I know we can say that right here, but in the face of dire circumstances, it's just hard for our heads to tell our hearts that's true. So I pray that your Spirit would give us that ability. And Lord, not just in our lives, but in the lives of others around us who come through really difficult times. We understand that difficult times are part and parcel of this place that you have us. And Jesus himself said, you'll have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I've overcome this world. So Lord, I pray that you would use us to speak these simple truths with authentic conviction to those who struggle with trying to find perspective in the midst of loss. And that you would speak through us about the devoted loving kindness, the chesed of God that will not be stopped in our lives despite what it looks like. And that we might stop and turn to you and place our trust in you. And instead of asking for explanations for why this has happened, that instead you might use us to remind those that nothing has separated us from God's love. Nothing. And that is our good. The nearness of God is my good, the psalmist says. So thank you for the reminders now, and we thank you for this wonderful book in Jesus' name. Amen. Next week, Deborah.